I'm going to tell you something too, guys. I think Julian Assange, Roger Stone, Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Representative Collins, Representative Green, and Louis Gohmert would be great presidents and vice presidents for the next 50 years. I know this much. I would never, ever vote a Democrat back into the White House as long as their party is as corrupt as this. To me, they're done. I will never, ever vote Democrat. Not for a woman, not for a black woman, not for a Muslim woman. And I want to know that, too. How the fuck do these refugees can get into office and vote in our country? Well, that was Joe Biden's idea back in, what was it? Who signed on to that? McCain signed on to that. Biden signed on to that. No. You're either born and bred in this country or you're not here.
Examiner, the Russian collusion hoax meets unbelievable end, where you really laid out exactly how this started and how the Clinton campaign paid for a dirty dossier, which was then penetrated throughout our government, throughout the media, to keep this narrative alive and put a cloud under a duly elected president for 2 years.
Yeah, and I would also say this is kind of a strange situation where you have McCarthyism, like new McCarthyism, that merged with Watergate wannabes. So you had unbelievable leaks that occurred across all levels of our government. You had all sorts of reporters. 90% of the press essentially was in on this. It started by dirtying up a presidential candidate, and then it went on to dirtying up a president. And you had a bunch of, I think, people within FBI, DOJ, we don't know exactly where, but they're like want to be the next Deep Throat, the person who's leaking classified information for the betterment of all society. But in this case, it just got completely out of hand, and we've had unbelievable disclosures of classified information. And this is why we've been working so hard for 2.5 years, waiting for a real attorney general, which we have now, an Attorney General Barr. A grown-up is finally in the room, and which is why we're prepared to do a lot of cleanup here.
Let's talk about that cleanup and what comes next, because we want to get into where the law was broken. You are going to come out with a list of referrals, and you told me you are ready to hand this over to the AG this upcoming week. What can you tell us about this list of referrals and about the referral of criminal conduct that you are about to release, sir?
So we've been working on this for 2.5 years, compiling information, right, as we continue this investigation. We couldn't really send these criminal referrals over without an attorney general in place. So we're prepared this week to notify the attorney general that we're prepared to send those referrals over and brief him if he wishes to be briefed. We think they're pretty clear. But as of right now, this may not be all of them, but this cleans up quite a bit. We have 8 referrals that we're prepared to send over to the Attorney General this week.
Involved with it. I was over at OMB during that process. I don't really have much interest. I know what it says, and it says no collusion and no obstruction. Keep in mind, if we give the Democrats all 400 pages unredacted, that's not going to be the end of the inquiry. Then they're going to want another 1,000 pages that went into making that. Then they're going to talk to the witnesses themselves. This is not about getting to the truth. It's not about the facts. This is a political show by the Democrats because they just don't like the fact that
just one more point on this, then we'll get to health care, because I know you had a big meeting this weekend.
Been a busy week.
I Camp David. The president, will he change, or do you know if he would like to see the report before it goes to Congress?
I think the president's been very consistent. Mr. Barr is going to make those decisions, and I'm comfortable.
24th letter, the special counsel did not make a traditional prosecutorial judgment regarding this allegation. Instead, the report recounts 10 episodes involving the president and discusses potential legal theories for connecting those activities to the elements of an obstruction offense. After carefully reviewing the facts and legal theories outlined in the report, and in consultation with the Office of Legal Counsel and other department lawyers, the Deputy Attorney General and I concluded that the evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Although the Deputy Attorney General and I disagreed with some of the special counsel's legal theories and felt that some of the episodes examined did not amount to obstruction as a matter of law, we did not rely solely on that in making our decision. Instead, we accepted the special counsel's legal framework for purposes of our analysis and evaluated the evidence as presented by the special counsel in reaching our conclusions. And as the special counsel's report acknowledges, there is substantial evidence to show that the president was frustrated and angered by his sincere belief that the investigation was undermining his presidency, propelled by his political opponents, and fueled by illegal leaks. Nonetheless, the White House fully cooperated with the special counsel's investigation, providing unfettered access to campaign and White House documents, directing senior aides to testify freely, and asserting no privilege claims. And at the same time, the president took no act that in fact deprived the special counsel of the documents and witnesses necessary to complete his investigation.
I'm very concerned about the statements made by Attorney General Barr. I think that they undermine our Constitution. They undermine the role of the Attorney General. He is not the Attorney General of Donald Trump. He is the Attorney General of the United States.
I think there was some spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur. I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal.
It's a show game. Look at this imaginary conspiracy versus the fact that the Russians interfered with our elections, of the extent to which the Trump campaign worked with the Russians in rigging, in trying to upset our democratic election.
In the summer of 2016, the CIA and FBI and NSA worked very closely together to try to understand as much as possible about what the Russians were doing.
There's no doubt they were spying on Trump's people and campaign. The question was it lawful?
What has been found during this period of time are the illegal acts of getting this whole phony investigation started. It was an illegal investigation. It was started illegally. Everything about it was crooked. Every single thing about it. There were dirty cops. These were bad people.
Part of my responsibility is to protect the civil liberties of the American people, and I think something that is important is that the law enforcement and intelligence agencies respect the limits on their powers.
How do
I think the Attorney General will find it quite interesting for the investigation that now we know that he's doing.
Well, let me go into the issue, which I think is very important here, because I'm assuming you're not going to name the names, but I think a lot of them are very obvious, at least to me, and I won't sit here and offer conjecture. You're not going to talk publicly about it at this point.
No, and it wouldn't be appropriate, right? Because a lot of this is highly sensitive, classified information. The Attorney General, everything that I've seen, he's a grown-up. And so, part of the reason why we're sending these over in this way, where we want to brief him directly, is because we have trust and confidence in him. So this isn't, one of these things where we have to get a bunch of media and hype it up. The fact of the matter is I want to send this to the Attorney General, brief him, let him look at it, ask us questions that he may have about this. And, look, these people that were involved in this, let's just say what we feel is inappropriate behavior, and we think that
effort in the defense of our institution. Thank the ranking member for his leadership on the committee. We're making a simple request today that Democrats protect the integrity of the House of Representatives and refer Michael Cohen to the Department of Justice for perjury. Why is this controversial? Michael Cohen swore under oath to tell the truth before the House Oversight Committee, but he lied, and multiple times. Ranking Member Jordan and the rest of us warned the Democrats that we couldn't trust a man who was going to jail for lying to Congress. That's just common sense. We warned the Democrats that it would be foolish to fall into his trap. But they couldn't help themselves. They took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Chairman Cummings promised the American people that if Michael Cohen lied, he'd hold him accountable. and I quote, nail him to the cross, end quote. But 43 days later, and nothing from Chairman Cummings. Why hasn't the chairman acted? Doesn't he want to protect the integrity of his committee?
No, he doesn't
His
give a
inaction
shit.
and the inaction of House Democrats only encourages future witnesses to lie to us.
Yep.
Democrats claim that they want to get to the truth, but it appears they're perfectly okay with witnesses lying to them as long as it supports their anti-Trump agenda.
Yep.
If the Democrat leadership won't take action on their own, at the very least they should permit a vote on the floor and allow this resolution to refer Cohen to the DOJ. Let's have a debate, then let's let the members decide. That's how the House is supposed to operate. I want to thank Leader McCarthy for his leadership. You heard it earlier today, the contrast between what he is pushing, the people's agenda, and what Speaker Pelosi is pushing, 2020 talking points. And I want to thank our ranking member for the committee, his leadership, his direction, and his drive to get to the truth. I want to thank the other members and the members of the press who are here. It's time for us to defend the integrity of our institution. Thank you. I'll be followed by Leader McCarthy.
There were multiple opportunities for people associated with the Trump campaign to collude, and they didn't. So multiple times where the forbidden fruit was placed in front of them and they didn't bite. But all that does, I would also point out this. There's been reference from the Democrats relative to Watergate and the Clinton special counsel. Watergate, there was a break-in. With Clinton, there was perjury. With the chief charge of this special counsel's investigation, there was no collusion. But here we are today. Well, actually 3 weeks ago, the chairman of the committee launched 81 letters to 60-some different individuals. And now today we're going to subpoena documents that the AG said he will give us in a matter of days. But maybe the most important point, I think, is the one that my colleague from Texas made, Mr. Ratcliffe. The idea that the chairman of the Intelligence Committee said he wants everything made public, including classified information, and the idea that the chair of the Judiciary Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, said this week, that he wants everything made public, including grand jury material, that's maybe the scariest thing of all.
Yeah, no shit.
So the Attorney General has said he's going to turn this over in a matter of days. Let's wait. Let's get the information, and then let's look at it then. With that, I would yield back the remaining 20 seconds to the gentlelady from Arizona.
I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
Would you strike last word?
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I support the Buck Amendment. When the human body sees life expire within it, one of the final sounds that it can make in dramatic and loud fashion is a death rattle. And I would suggest to the American people that what they're witnessing is the death rattle of the Democrats' Russia collusion lie.
Amen.
For 22 months, my colleagues on the other side, many of them, said there was actual evidence of collusion. And so now, clearly seeing that that is not true, we observe our colleagues moving through the stages of grief.
Yep.
First, we saw shock and surprise. My colleagues would huddle together after the findings of the Mueller report were released, wondering what to do next, what play to run after losing all credibility with the American people. And after shock, we now are in the stage of denial, where the principal findings of the Mueller report, they just can't be true. They can't be accepted. They must be false. There must be more information we can discover. I know we're beginning the baseball season, so perhaps a baseball analogy would be appropriate. This would be like saying, well, we've lost the game, but we have to tweeze through the box score to see if we won the third inning. That's what is essentially happening with the desire of Democrats in the production of these subpoenas and voting on them today. It also represents a stark departure from the standards and statements that my own Democratic colleagues have laid out just last Congress and this Congress. I'm quoting now from the Speaker of the House, Ms. Pelosi, in February of 2018. She said, President Trump has surrendered his constitutional responsibility as Commander-in-Chief by releasing highly classified and distorted intelligence, by not protecting intelligence sources and methods. He just sent his friend Putin a bouquet. Well, there was no bouquet, no untoward relationship with Vladimir Putin, but there was a statement from the Speaker of the House acknowledging that if you do not review sources and methods, you are derelict in your duty to the country. Well, now that they're going through their stages of grief, perhaps we're approaching bargaining, because now they're trying to bargain away their own standards. But it's not just the Speaker of the House. Let's look to statements from the Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler. He said on June 28th of 2018, Republicans are requesting documents they know they cannot have. He continued, and if the majority, speaking of the Republicans, is rightly denied, they will do their best to undermine the credibility of the Department of Justice. Well, Mr. Chairman, you are now asking for documents you know you cannot have. And you're doing so in order to erode confidence in the Attorney General who leads the Department of Justice, because he has concluded that there was not collusion and that your principal Russian narrative was not truthful, was not credible. We were right, you were wrong, and the American people know it. And so as we proceed now on this unfocused 81-pronged investigation that the Judiciary Committee has launched, as we continue to have these mindless votes on unnecessary subpoenas, I sincerely hope that the American people will remember what things the Democrats were saying just months ago, that there was collusion, that there was actual evidence of collusion.
Where is
and that sources and methods could never be disclosed as a consequence of our fidelity to our oath and to the people of this country. Let's have some consistency, and let's at least have some acknowledgement that you all were not telling the truth to the American people for an extended period of time. We were, and you should not be trusted. I yield back.
Get him, Matt.
Question occurs on the amendment. All those in favor of the Buck Amendment will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Chairman, ask for a recorded vote.
Yeah.
Roll call vote has been requested. As your name is called, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nadler?
No.
Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes no. Ms. Jackson-Lee? Ms. Jackson-Lee votes no. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen votes no. Mr. Johnson of Georgia? Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes no. Mr. Deutsch? Mr. Deutsch votes no. Ms. Bass? Mr. Richmond? Mr. Richmond votes no. Mr. Jeffries?
No.
Mr. Jeffries votes no. Mr. Cicilline?
No.
Mr. Cicilline votes no. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes no. Mr. Liu? Mr. Liu votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes no. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes no. Ms. Demings? Ms. Demings votes no.
There's another
Mr.
fucking
Correa?
cunt.
Mr. Correa votes no. Ms. Scanlon? No. Ms. Scanlon votes no. Ms. Garcia? No. Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse votes no. Ms.
Good
McBath?
little niggas.
Ms. McBath votes no. Mr. Stanton?
No.
All
Mr.
of you.
Stanton votes no.
Good little
Ms. Dean-
niggas.
No. Ms. Dean votes no. Ms. McCarcel Powell? Ms. McCarcel Powell votes no. Ms. Escobar? No. Ms. Escobar votes no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins votes yes. Mr. Sensenbrenner? Mr. Sensenbrenner votes aye. Mr. Shabbat? Mr. Shabbat votes aye. Mr. Gomert? Mr. Gomert votes aye. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Buck? Mr. Buck votes aye. Mr. Ratcliffe? Mr. Ratcliffe votes yes. Ms. Roby? Mr. Gates? Mr. Gates votes aye. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana? Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes aye. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes aye. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes aye. Ms. Lesko? Ms. Lesko votes aye.
You're looking
Mr.
at American
Reschenthaler?
patriots now,
Mr.
right now.
Reschenthaler votes aye. Mr. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Klein votes aye. Mr. Armstrong? Mr. Armstrong votes yes. Mr. Stubbe? Mr. Stubbe votes yes.
Clerk will report. One more. The clerk will suspend.
Ms. Bass votes no.
Has everyone else voted? The clerk will report.
Ms. Jackson Lee is recorded as no.
Of course she is, monkey fucking bitch.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 16 ayes and 24 noes.
A majority having voted against the amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Another amendment?